Hello, my name is Taylor Norris, and this is my book review on Blood at the Root, A Racial Cleansing in America by Patrick Phillips. It was published September 20th, 2016. Um, I read this book on my MacBook through the Kindle app, so I do not have a hard copy of the book, but I looked up a cover of the book so everyone could see what it looks like. This book is about Patrick Phillips, and then the events that happened in 1912, what kind of led up to that, and then the events in the 1980s. In 1912, this all takes place in Georgia, in a small little town, not too far from Atlanta, where all these African Americans were basically pushed out of their homes in this town. They were because these few women came up dead, and the townspeople believed it was the African Americans' fault. So they got pitchforks, they got fire, and they ran out these African Americans, burning their homes, burning their belongings, slandering them, beating them, killing them. Just a bunch of horrific events. Then you flash forward to the 1980s, and there is a Brotherhood March because this town is still all white. And it's a very, very horrific the Brotherhood March was very horrific and sad to think of that was happening in the 80s because that's not, too far away. I was not born in the 80s. My mom was alive then. And I know some of you may have been. So it's just it's hard to wrap my mind around, especially since we're not too far from Georgia. It's a couple hours away. But essentially, in the book, Patrick Phillips is jumping from his time growing up in this town to the events that happened in 1912 and his research that he is doing. He did not condone any of this. He did not understand it. His family was from Birmingham, Alabama, and his parents were activists. They fought against this type of behavior. So they faced a little bit of backlash in the school. Even children not in the school, but in the town. But in the school, Patrick faced backlash as well because he would listen to some of his friends say very derogatory and racist things about African Americans, and he just, he wouldn't quite understand. So he faced that, but that's kind of what it's about. It goes back and forth between his life in the 80s and what he witnessed and what he went through, as well as his research and the events that happened in 1912. I love this book. I read this entire book cover to cover, every word on every page, and I loved it. I thought it was a great read. I would recommend it to anybody. I just really enjoyed the story. It was a great story. It was not difficult to read at all. I feel like most people could read it well. I mean, you do need to pay attention, but it's not like if you zone out for a little bit, you're gonna be completely lost. Unless you're on this part where in parts, he goes through and he just lists a lot of facts, a lot of information. That's a little overwhelming to me, but some people may be fine with it. That was the only thing that I found was a little hard to read, but it didn't make me dislike the book at all. I still very much enjoyed the read, and I thought it was very informational, very sad at times, just thinking about some of the things that these African Americans had to go through, and still even go through today. But I did enjoy the book, and it was enlightening to myself to open my eyes to these events. I didn't even know this occurred. I couldn't, at first I was like, this is a true story? I had to look it up because I was like, there's no way, there's no way. Then I saw Oprah's special on YouTube where she goes to the town and she interviews some of the townspeople. And I encourage everybody to go at least listen to her little short segment. I think it's like a maybe 2 or 3 minute video. It's hard to watch because you think some of those people are still alive today and they're just openly being racist. That's just, it blows my mind, honestly. But I do encourage everybody to watch that at least if you don't choose to read the book, because it is very enlightening. Like I said, there wasn't anything that I disliked about the book. I thought it was very good. I didn't think it was a hard read, and I do encourage others to read it. It's enlightening, especially these events that I don't think most people are aware of. I had no clue. My mom didn't even know about it, and it was just interesting. The lesson plan I chose to do is for a 6th grade class, and it is predominantly about the Progressive era and the activist W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. and about what they did during that time to their fight for equality for African Americans and a better life. I think it was a great lesson plan to do, considering the progressive era takes place in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, and 1912 is right there in the middle, kind of. And then there was also a huge election in 1912. So I didn't really talk about that in my lesson plan, but I also felt like that was, it could be talked about. Um, but essentially, in the lesson plan, it talks about Booker T. Washington and his life, kind of like how he was born a slave, how he founded Tuskegee, and like why his views differ so much from W.E.B. Du Bois is potentially because of the environments they grew up in. W.E.B. Du Bois was, he went to school, he went to a college, he founded the NAACP, very influential, but they both were fighting for the same things, but they had different ways of doing so. Some people say that Booker T. Washington was an accommodator, while W.E.B. Du Bois was an agitator. And so it kind of has students look at it like that and see, which one they find more influential. So in the lesson, at the beginning, we do a bell ringer and it talks about what freedoms the students are willing to give up and which ones they would like to keep. And so we would have a discussion about that, like a whole class discussion. And then we move in and watch the Atlanta Compromise, which is a speech by Booker T. Washington, which I also think is important because it ties into the Georgia scene with that small town that those African Americans were drove out of. And then we listened to the Niagara Movement by W.E.B. Du Bois. After we listened to that, the students, I will split them into two teams, the Washington and the Du Bois team, and they will look up information and try to find things that would make their activists more influential. That's really the topic. How was your activist more influential than this one? So the teams would have a few minutes to look up stuff, and then they would present their information to the class. Then after both teams present information, they would go in and debate one another, asking hard questions, trying to figure out whose activist is more influential. After a few minutes of debate, I would want to highlight on a few things, such as, Du Bois finding the NAACP and the Jim Crow laws, and Booker T. Washington finding Tuskegee because that is a college in Alabama. So there's a few things I would go through and highlight at the end of the debate, and just to kind of wrap everything up. And then the students would write an exit slip about, I think, 3 things that they learned about whichever activist and about their freedoms.